Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, Shabbos Daf Lamed Ches. We're on the last line of Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, Bo minei min Reb Chiya bar Abba. They asked the following question of Reb Chiya bar Abba. What would be in the following situation of Shachach Kedera, one who forgot his pot, Al Gabi Kir, on top of the stove, which features those exposed coals. So he did Shehiyah on top of a kira when he wasn't allowed to. Ubishla b'Shabbos, and it continued cooking on Shabbos. Ma'u, what is the halachic status of this food? Is it mutter or aser? Ishtik, so he remained silent, he didn't respond. L'machar, on the following day, Nafak, he went out, Dorish lehu, he taught them as follows. We have a Tosefta which says, Hamavashel b'Shabbos, one who actually cooks on Shabbos, he did the malacha d'oraisa of bishul. What is the halacha of the food that was cooked? B'shoigig yoichal. If it happened b'shoigig, if it was inadvertent, he didn't know it was Shabbos, he didn't know this is a malacha, then the food is permitted. B'meizid, if it was done willfully, lo yoichal, the food is asur. And Reb Chiya bar Abba concludes with these words: V'lo yishna, by us, by the shachach kedera, by the shehiyah, there's no difference between shogeg and mezid. But he didn't explain in which direction. Are they both mutter? Are shogeg and mezid both mutter by shehiyah, or they're both aser? My v'lo, what do you mean by that? We have two approaches. Rabbi Rav Yosef Damit Havayu, they both said as follows: Le'atera, what he meant to say was that by shehiyah, it's not as chomer, as stringent as bishul. In our case, whether it happened b'shogeg or b'mezid, the food is mutter. Why? What is the difference between shehiyah and bishul? Very simple. Me'vashal hu dekavad ma'isa. By bishul there was an active ma'isa of bishul, and therefore over there it's more stringent. B'mezid lo yechal. If it happened b'mezid, you shouldn't eat it. Aval hai, but in our case of shehiyah, lo dekavad ma'isa. It wasn't an active ma'isa done. The pot was merely left on the stove. Therefore, it's more lenient. B'mezid na yechal. Even if it happened b'mezid, it is mutter. So this was Rabbi Rav Yosef's approach, that in the case of shehiyah, shogeg and mezid are both mutter. The food is permitted. Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, just the opposite, li surah. By shehiyah, it's more stringent than bishul. Whether it happened b'shogeg or b'mezid, the food is asur. Why? Mevashel hu lo asur le'rumi. With regards to bishul, there's no concern. A yid is not suspected of going and willfully doing a malacha d'oraisa of bishul. So if he comes and tells us what happened b'shogeg, it was inadvertent, unintentionally, we trust him. We take his word for it. We don't suspect that he's coming to deceive us, that it was really b'mezid, because a yid is not suspected of doing a malach on Shabbos. We don't question his motive. He's not going to deceive us. And when he says it happened b'shogeg, we can take his word for granted. B'shogeg yoichal. Therefore, if he tells us it was b'shogeg, it's mutter. We're not concerned that it was really mezid, and he's presenting it as a shogeg. Abol hai, but in our case of shehiyah, which is more lenient, it's a malacha d'Rabbanan, and perhaps in his mind it's more kal. It's not such a big concern. It's more lenient than a malacha d'oraisa, perhaps. Yes, he did it b'mezid, and he's going to pretend, he's going to deceive us and say, well, it was only b'shogeg. So we can't really trust him. Therefore, even if he says it was b'shogeg, we must deal with it and treat it like a mezid, and it's asur b'achil. Says the Gemara, "Aval hai." In our case of shehiyah, the asur l'rumi, perhaps he's going to try to deceive us and purport that it was a shogeg when it was really a mezid. Therefore, b'shogeg nami lo yechal. So, regarding shehiyah, what is the halach of the food? According to Rabbi Rav Yosef, whether it happened b'shogeg or b'mezid, the food is mutter. According to Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak, in both cases it's asur. Meisei v'avakash from a brayso. Shachach kedera al gabi kira. If one forgets his pot on top of the kira, ubishla b'Shabbos, and it cooked on Shabbos. If it happened b'shogeg, yoichal, he can eat it. B'mezid, if it was b'mezid intentionally, lo yoichal, he can't eat it. But medvar amur, when is this halacha said? B'chamen shlo yuchma kol tzarchan. If it was water which wasn't fully cooked, so it actually proceeded through its cooking process on Shabbos. Food which wasn't fully cooked. In that case, we have this halacha that if it happened b'shogeg, it's mutter, but b'mezid it's asr. Aval chamen shuchmel kol tzarkan, but if we have hot water which was already fully cooked, v'tavshel shel bishul kol tzarchai, food, solid food which was also fully cooked, in that case it's more lenient, since the cooking process has already been completed before he did the shehiyah. If so, bein b'shoigeg, bein b'mezid yoichal. In both cases it's mutter divrei Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, well, it depends. With regards to chamen, I agree with you. Chamen shuchma kol tzorcha mutaran. B'pnei, why shemitstamek v'ralei. We had this concept on Daf Zayin. Mitstamek is referring to that stage of overcooking. It already finished cooking, and now it's adding to the cooking process. It's mitstamek, it's shriveling, it's condensing, it's getting overcooked. It says Rabbi Yehuda, hot water, once it cooks, the overcooking actually ruins it. It evaporates the water. So the cooking process has completed. In this case, I agree with you that whether it was b'shayi or b'mezid, it's mutter. However, with regard to tavshel, a cooked food, v'tavshel shabishal kol tzarchai, also in that case it's also because when it proceeds and it keeps on cooking and overcooking, that's still part of the cooking process. It's benefiting, it's aiding the flavor, the taste of the food. It's improving it. So we consider it to be part of the cooking process. And therefore, in that case, if a shehiyah took place, it is aser if it was b'mezid. Any type of food which gets improved on account of its added cooking, of its being overcooked, kagoyin, for instance, kruv, cabbage, or pulim, those type of beans, or basatarav, crushed meat, aser, it is aser because we consider this to be part of the cooking process, and therefore, if it happened on Shabbos, it is aser when it was b'mezid. But if the added cooking actually ruins it, mutter, it's mutter because it's not considered to be part of the cooking process. Okay, so this was the brisa. Now, how does it pertain to us? We had a kasha from this brisa on the shittas mentioned earlier. Katanimiya, at any rate, what does it say in this brisa? Tavshel shalei bishal kol tzarchai, a tavshel which was not fully cooked, and a shehiyah took place with this tavshel. The brisa tells us, well, it depends. If it was b'shoigeg, then it's mutter. If it's b'mezid, then it's asur. Now let's view this brisa and try to align it with the aforementioned opinions. Bishleil of Nachman Yitzchak like Hasha. So it's all well according to Rav Nachman Yitzchak, who tells us that if one did shehiyah b'isr, whether it was b'shoigeg or b'mezid, they're both asur. So we could figure out that this brisa will work according to him as well. Why? Like Kasha, it's not difficult, because although he told us there's no difference between shogeg and mezid, they're both us, and this brisa specifically tells us that shogeg is mutter. It depends at what point in history we're speaking about. Like Kasha, it's not difficult. Kan koydem gzera, kan la'ach gzera. We know the Gemara is going to tell us soon that there was a gzera, a decree implemented by the Chachamim that shehiyah be'isr carries with it an isr achila, whether it was b'shogeg or b'mezid. This is a gzera we'll discuss soon in the Gemara. The Gemara tells us as follows: that Rav Nachman Yitzchak, who applied an isr to shehiyah, whether it was b'shogeg or b'mezid, he was referring to la'acha gzera, to the point in history where the gzera was already established and enacted. Therefore, he tells us that in both cases it's also the brisa. It's not difficult because the brisa is discussing the point in time in history which was pre-gzera. Therefore, the brisa tells us, well, it depends. Shogeg is mutter, mezid is asur. There's no contradiction, there's no kasha from the brisa, which is discussing the point in history which was koydem gzera, and Rav Nachman Yitzchak is discussing la'ach gzera. So that explains things according to him. Once again, Bishleima, let Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, like kasha, it's not difficult. Kan koydem gzera, the brisa which allows shogeg, is speaking about before the gzera took place. Kan la'ach gzera. Rav Nachman Yitzchak, who was interpreting Reb Chiya bar Abba's halacha, he was discussing the point in time of history which was after this gzera was enacted, and therefore the food is asur, whether it was b'shogeg or b'mezid. Elo Rabbi Rav Yosef de Amri lehetera. However, according to Rabbi Rav Yosef, who say that in both cases shogeg and mezid, they're both mutter, the food is edible. Ikoidim gzera, if they are discussing the point and time in history pre-gzera, before the Chachamim enacted this decree that the food is asr, whether it was b'shayig or b'mezid. So if they're discussing the pre-gzera point in history, and the Brisa as well is certainly referring to that point in history, because the Brisa says that shogeg is mutter. If so, we have a contradiction, we have a kasha. From the Brisa on them, kasha mezid. It is difficult from the Brisa, which tells us that although shogeg is mutter, but mezid is asr, and they maintain that even mezid is mutter. So this won't work. Ila achak, or if you'll propose and say that although the Brisa is speaking about kodim gzera, but they're speaking ala achak gzera, if so, it will be even more difficult. Kasha nami shogeg, then we'll have a double kasha. We know after the gzera everything is asr, but they maintain that everything is mutter. Not only is shogeg mutter, but even mezid is mutter, and the gzera came to prohibit both. Not only mezid, also shogeg. Kasha nami shogeg. How can they say that it is mutter? We have a double kasha. Not only is mezid a kasha, even shogeg is a kasha, because the gzera prohibited both, and they are matir both. Kasha, says the Gemara, indeed, it's unresolved. We can't figure out a way to reconcile the Shita of Rav and Shmuel in accordance with this Brisa. Continue the Gemara, my gzera. So what was this decree, this gzera that we mentioned earlier? The Amar Avida bar Shmuel, Amar Abba, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav. B'tchila initially, Hayu Oimrim, so Chachamim said, Hamavashal b'Shabbos, one who actually cooks on Shabbos, b'shogeg, if it happened, b'shogeg yoichal, the food is permitted. B'mezid, if it happened, b'mezid lo yoichal, can't eat the food. V'hu hadin l'shechech. The same concept and principle applies to one who left his pot on the stove. That b'shogeg it's permitted, b'mezid it's also. However, misharabu mashin b'mezid. Once it came the point in history where the ones who would leave their pot on the stove b'mezid, it was increased. This phenomenon became more prevalent. Misharabu mashin b'mezid. V'oimrim, and they come, they pretend, they say shechech manu. We merely forgot. It was unintentional. Chazru v'kansu, the Chacham came around and said, no, they applied a knas ala shechech. So even a shechech, even one who claims that he did shia b'shogeg, the food is asur. So this was the gzera, which was applied by the Chachamim on account of some sort of inappropriate practice, where it was rabu, it was increased. This phenomenon was increased where people would actually leave the food on the stove and pretend that it was a shogeg. So Chachamim lumped them together and said shehiyah be'isr, it prohibits it makes the food asr from being eaten, whether it was b'shogeg or b'mezid. Whereas bishul, if it was b'mezid, it's asr, but b'shogeg it's mutter. Like we explained earlier, that this concern doesn't apply to bishul. A yid is not suspected of going and being mavashal b'mezid. So if he comes and says it was b'shogeg, we take his word for it. We believe him that it was b'shogeg and not b'mezid. So, in summary, we learned the halacha, if one leaves a pot on a kira, on a stove with exposed coals, what is the halacha of that food inside the pot? The food that cooked on Shabbos while on that kira. So the Gemara told us la'acha gzera, after the decree was implemented, the food is asr, regardless of whether it happened b'shogeg or b'mezid. What about kodim gzera, before the decree was established? We have a machlokes. Rabba and Rav Yosef both hold that the food is mutter, whether the shehiyah happened b'shogeg or b'mezid. According to Rav Yitzchak, just the opposite. The food is asr, whether it was b'shogeg or b'mezid. Now the Brisa presented for us another machlokes between Rav Yehuda and Rav Meir with regards to the food which was fully cooked. According to Rav Meir, at that point, it can't become asr, even if the shehiyah took place on top of those exposed coals, because the cooking process has completed. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if this is a food item which improves on account of its added cooking, its mistamach v'yafaloi, yes, we reckon with that cooking, and indeed the food is asr in this case. Apparently Rabbi Meir doesn't reckon with that. Rabbi Meir holds this is merely improving its mashpiach. We don't regard it as part of the integral cooking process, and therefore, in this case where the food was already left on the flame, we don't apply an isser to this food, even if it happened to mezid. Continues the Gemara. we seem to have a kasha, a contradiction between our Bryce's presentation of Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda and a Bryce which we learned earlier in Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, which also presented opinions of Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, Kasha de Rabbi de Rabbi, Kasha de Rida Rida. We seem to have a machlekes, a contradiction between two Rabbis and two Rabbi Yehudas. Why? Because in our Brisa, Rabbi tells us that chamin or tafshel, which was a bishul called sarkam, which were fully cooked, the shehiyah doesn't prohibit those food items from being eaten. However, in the Brisa back on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, when Rabbi discusses shehiyah, he says the heter of shehiyah only pertains strictly to chamin, to hot water, but not to tafshel. So we have a contradiction between two Rabbis. We have a contradiction between two Rabbi Yehudas as well. Kasha Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because over here by us, Rabbi Yehuda tells us that the tafshel, even if it was fully cooked, the shehiyah asers that tafshel. It prohibits that tafshel. Why? Because it's mistamak v'yafaloi. However, in the Brisa and the Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yehuda tells us clearly that shehiyah is mutter not only by chamin but also by tafshel. So how are we going to reconcile both Brises? Says more, no problem. The Rameh like Kasha, it's not difficult. Halachatchila the Eved. We're speaking about two different cases. The Bryce and Daf Lamed Zayin, where Rameh tells us that shehiyah is not allowed by tafshel, we're discussing the chatchila initially. Yes, initially. One may not do shehiyah on the tafshel. However, in our Bryce, we're discussing the Eved. It's after the fact. It's after it happened already. The Bryce told us, described the case of Shochach Kedera Gabikir. He left it there. So after the fact, Rameh says it's mutter even by a tafshel. The Rabbi Yehuda Namalei Kasha. We can answer the apparent contradiction between two Rabbi Yehudas. Come with Grufa Ketuma. One Bryce is discussing a kira which was Grufa Ketuma where the coals were covered or shoveled, which is the Bryce and Daf Lamed Zayin. Therefore, certainly, shehiyah is mutter not only on chamin, also on tafshel. But in our case, in our Bryce, we're discussing a kira which was not Grufa Ketuma, which ain't Grufa Ketuma, and therefore certainly the Reader says a kira which has exposed coals, and the shehiyah took place with a tafshel, the tafshel is awesome. Continues the Gemara back to the initial shaila. What about Avar v'Shahamai? Iboilu, they asked the question. Avar v'Shahamai. What if one goes out and leaves his pot on the kira with those exposed coals? What is the halach of this food? As Taisus points out, the Gemara is referring to Kaidim Gzeira. The Gemara wants to know what is the halach of the food. Mikan Sur Rabbanan, the Rabbanan apply a penalty, and that they prohibit this food from being eaten, or not. Toshma, come and listen to this right. Damar Shmuel bar Nasan, he related the following story. Damar Shmuel bar Nasan, Amar Chanina. Kishalach Rabbi Yosi Litzipori. When Rabbi Yosi went to Tzipori, Masa, so he noticed Chamin Shinishtal Gabekira. He noticed the hot water that was left on the kira. There was a shehiyah be'isr on the kira v'loy asalan. He didn't prohibit that water from being drunk. Beitzim mitzumakos. But when he found those shriveled, those eggs that were shriveled shenishtal gabekira, that shehiyah was done with those eggs on the kira v'asalan, so he applied an isr to those eggs. My love lo Shabbos. Apparently, he applied the Isser even to that Shabbos. He didn't allow the eggs, those shriveled eggs, to be eaten on that Shabbos. Why? What is the difference between the chaman and the beitzim? Rashi explains because the chaman, the hot water, is mitztamak v'ralen. When they overcook, they evaporate. It ruins the water. So in that case, it's mutter because the cooking procedure was already completed before Shabbos. However, those eggs which were being mitstamek, that simuk, that shriveling, that condensing, that added cooking was actually beneficial for the flavor, for the taste, for the quality of the eggs. And therefore it is usher. Since the shehiyah took place on Shabbos, my love loisi Shabbos, he applied the isser on that Shabbos, they weren't allowed to eat it. So we see that a shehiyah be isser ends up with an isser. Says the Gemara loy l'Shabbos habo. On that Shabbos he allowed it to be eaten. What the Mishnah, what the Gemara meant to say that the Asher Lahen, he applied an Isser, he was simply informing them that you're not meant to do this on the next Shabbos. You're not meant to do this Shehiyah. Okay, so it's inconclusive. We have no raya from this halacha. Continues the Gemara, but one thing we do see, that these eggs, when they shrivel, they improve. Michlal, apparently the beitzim mitzumakis mitztamkis v'yavalem. So apparently these eggs improve when they shrivel, when they condense. Says the Gemara, Michlal the beitzim mitzumakis mitztamkis v'yavalem. That's what you write in. The Amar B'chamar Chanina Pamachas. One time in Sarachti, Aniva Rebbe l'makom echad. So Rav Chama B'chanina tells us, at one time, I was a guest together with Rebbe in a specific place. They served us beitzim mitzumakis, these shriveled eggs, ku'uzrudin. They were small, they shrunk to the size of these wild apples. We ate many of them. So apparently, they tasted good, they were of good quality as a result of this added cooking and shriveling. Continues the Gemara, Beis said that not only is shehiyah mutter, but even chazorah, when we go ahead and return a pot that was taken off the stove, he may return it back onto the stove on Shabbos, provided that he addressed those coals, as we discussed in our Mishnah. Rav Sheshes, according to the shita that allows chazorah, machzirin afilu b'Shabbos. Even on Shabbos, chazorah may take place. Explains Rashi, not only at night, even by day. What would be the reason to differentiate between Laila and Yom? Explains Rashi, because the point of chazorah is that it's a continuous cooking process, a continuous shehiyah. One may not simply take a pot from the counter and put it on the stove. That's called a shehiyah chadasha. As the Mepharshim explains, it appears as though he's cooking on Shabbos. He's introducing new food to the oven. It looks like he's going in and embarking on a melechas bishul. The halacha of chazorah is strictly in a scenario where it appears as though it's one continuous cooking process. So he takes it off the flame, he puts it back on the flame. That's okay. Says Rashi, perhaps I would speculate to say that when one removes the pot off the stove at night, it certainly appears as though he's going to put it back because he needs it for tomorrow. So he's going to put it back with the intention to maintain its heat and to continue the process until tomorrow. So it is evident that he intends on putting it back, and therefore the chazorah is regarded as a continuous process. It's continuing the shehiyah. It's not considered as a new ma'aseh, a new entity. However, by day, once he removes the pot from the stove by day, perhaps it may appear as though he's taking it off for good. He's using it for his meal. He doesn't intend on putting it back. Therefore, to allow him to put it back, we wouldn't allow that, because it appears as though it's a shehiyah chadasha. He's placing it there anew. It's a new ma'aseh. It's not a continuation from the previous shehiyah. Says the Gemara, no. Rav Sheshes tells us, even if he did it by day, even if he took the pot off in the morning and he wants to put it back, it's allowed. Continues the Gemara, even during the daytime it's allowed. There was once a time we were standing in front of Le'ilam Rav Chia Bar Rabba, and we went to serve him. We took the kettle from the kumkum shulcham, this kettle of hot water. Medyuta tachtoinus. Medyuta means like a ali, Rashi says a second floor. We took it from the second floor up to Dutal Yoina to the some elevated floor. So we carried this kumkum shulcham from one floor to the next. Why did we do it? We went there to dilute his kais of hot water. They said dilute it with water. So we diluted his cup. And we went ahead and we returned. We brought the kumkumis, the kettle of hot water, back to its place. He didn't say anything. He didn't make a comment. So evidently it's mutter. We have a raya from here that chazor even by yom is mutter. Now, where does Rav Yeshe mention by yom? How do we see anything from Rav Yeshe's story with regard to our question whether chazor is allowed by day? So there are various interpretations here. Perhaps the fact that Rav Yeshe didn't stipulate that it took place at night. He didn't take pains to explain that. Apparently, it's not an important factor. It's irrelevant whether it took place at night or day, because chazor even by day is mutter. Others explain that since he went ahead and he took the the kumkum shalchamin, and went up to the to Rav Chia Rabbah and did the mizuk up there, it's apparent from there. The Allah perhaps assumes that he has no intention of bringing it back here, because otherwise, why did he take the kettle up to the wine? Why didn't he simply bring the wine here to the stove, which perhaps would be more convenient, simply to do the dilution over here? And once he finishes diluting it here, he'd go ahead and bring back the wine up there. Why did he bring the kettle up there? It appears that he's done with the cooking process. He has no intention of bringing the kettle back here. So the appearance here is that the cooking process has completed. Others explain, since this was a significant act, it was an interruption, it was a hefsek between one shehiyah and the next. He went, he took it and climbed up and diluted. So this whole process appears like an hefsek, like an interruption of the shehiyah. So to allow the shehiyah to continue, allow chazor in this case, is akin and equivalent to the discussion we had earlier regarding the chazor b'yom, where it appears as though the shehiyah has already been interrupted. Nevertheless, he allowed it. So apparently there's no difference between all these cases, and we regard the chazor as merely a continuation of the initial process of bishul. It's not considered to be a shehiyah chadash and it's mutter. Continues the Gemara, some other guidelines and various details regarding the halacha of chazor. Rav Zika, Rav Abba, Rav Tadoi. Lo shanu. Chazor is only allowed only if the pot is still in his hands. In that case, indeed, it appears as though the chazara is a continuous process. There was no interruption. He's still holding on to it. He took it off the stove. He's holding on to it, and then he returns it. But if he should place it down on the floor, asur, you can't do chazara, because placing it on the floor constitutes a hefsek, an interruption. And if we were allow him to go and put it back on the stove, it appears as though it's a new ma'isa shehiyah, and it looks like bishul. It looks like he's going and introducing a new item to the stove. It doesn't appear as one continuous process. Omar Abi, no. Rav Tadoi de'avad the garmeu de'avad. This statement from Rav Tadoi, this stringency, it's his own opinion. Others don't agree with him. Others hold that even placing it on the floor allows chazor. Elo rad the hocha amar Rav Chia Rav Yochanan. I feel a nichal gabe karka mutter. Even if he places it down on the ground, we regard the chazora, which will take place subsequently, as a continuous process. Continues the Gemara. Pligiba, there's actually a machlokes between Rav Dimi and Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. V'tarvayu, their dispute regards Tarvayu Mishmei Rav Lezer Amr. They're both quoting Rav Lezer. They have different versions of the halacha in the name of Rav Lezer. Chadam, and one says, Oidem b'yodei mutter. So if the pot is still in his hand, the shehiyah was never interrupted, and indeed he may go ahead and do chazorah. He may put it back on the stove. Al gabe karka asa, but if he places it down on the ground below, that is considered to be a hefsek, and he may not do chazorah. So this is one opinion. V'chadam, the other one says, no, he nichal gabe karka nami mutter. Even if he places it down on the ground, it's also mutter. He's allowed to do chazorah after he's done. Omar Chizki b'shvei Abaye. Ho the amris. This that you just told me, that oidem yodim mutter, that if he has the pot still in his hand, it's mutter, but that's provided. We need another ingredient here. Lo yamar, that is only said, elo shadate la'achser. The person has the intention, a kavanah, to go return the pot to the stove. So we need two elements here in favor. Number one, he's holding it, and number two, he has the proper intention. But if he has no intention to return the item back to the stove, so even if he's holding it in his hand, that is not sufficient to consider the chazor as a continuous process, and it's also to do chazor in that case. So once again, two elements are required in favor. Number one, he has to be holding onto it with his hands. Number two, he has to have the kavanah, the das, to go return the item back to the stove. Michlal, so we imply from here that only if you have both elements, it's mutter. But if one of them are missing, then it's also. Mechlal dal gabe karka. But if you should place the stove down on the karka, aval b'shadati lahachzer also. Because if you just told me that he needs to hold it in his hand, number one. Number two, he has to have the right kavanah. We imply from here that if one of these elements are missing, for instance, it's not in his hand, it's on the karka, so one of the elements are missing, even if the other one is present, even if it has the proper intention, it's also. Because both are needed. Number one, location. Number two, intention. Ikadamri. There are others that had a different version of this. This said, you told me that if he places the pot down on the floor, on the karka, it's asr. That's only because both elements are missing. It's the wrong location. And he has no proper intentions. But, lo yamar, this is only said, if he has no intention of returning the item back to the stove. But if all along he had this intention of replacing the item back to the stove, of returning the pot back on the kira, then mutter, then indeed it's mutter. So only one element is required. Even if he has the wrong location, he placed it down on the floor. But he had the proper intention of returning the item back to the stove, it's mutter. Michlal, apparently, only one element is required, only one ingredient, either location or intention. So if we have one of those two, it's mutter. So if he has it still in his hand, we have the proper location. Even if he doesn't have the proper intention, he doesn't have a kavanah to return the item back to the stove, it's mutter. So according to this version, only one ingredient is required. Whereas according to the first version, both ingredients are required. Concludes the Gemara. So we have two categories. We have when it's still in his hand, there's one set of halachas. We have we have one set of halachas. What about something in between? If he hung the pot up on the hook, on the rod, on the stick, so it's not in his hand, nor is it down on the ground. What is the halacha here? So he placed the pots on the bed. What is the halacha? What if he spills, he pours out the contents from one pot into the other, and he wants to do chazara now? Do we look at the content? It's the same content, the same food, and it's considered to be one continuous ma'aseh shehiyah, one continuous ma'aseh bishul, and chazara is allowed? Or do we look at the pot? It's a new pot, it's a new entity, it's a new ma'aseh shehiyah, and we don't allow him to put it back on the kira. Teiku, we leave it unresolved. So in summary, we learned about the halacha of chazara. Chazara is allowed, and the Gemara told us even by day, even if he had removed the pot when it was Shabbos day, he can go ahead and return it back to its place. The Gemara told us if he's holding it in his hand, it certainly is mutter, but if he placed it on the floor below on the karka, we have achlokes. The Gemara told us about the concept of tzarech das. He needs to have the intention of returning the item back to the stove. Some say this condition of das applies even when it's still in his hand, because he needs two elements in favor. Number one, location. Number two, intention. The other Shita said no. We only require one ingredient. If it's in his hand, that's sufficient. He doesn't need to have the intention of das. However, if it's on the karka, we don't have the proper location. In that case, he needs the das. So his intention sort of undoes the fact that it's on the karka, and the fact that he has the kavanah lachzer, that is sufficient. The Gemara ended with some shilas when it was neither in his hand nor on the karka. It was on the makil, it was on the bed, or he transferred the food to a different pot. The meicham is this kumkumas, this water kettle. So indeed, we left this unresolved, whether these have a kind of a din of oidumiyadai or is considered to be al-gabe karka. Continues the Mishnah, Tanner, an oven, that was fueled using kash, straw, b'gvava, the stubble, the straw, the splinters of wood collected in the fields. And these are types of fuels that don't really last so long. They don't endure. Once they burn out, they don't leave behind any coals. Nevertheless, since it's a tanner, and a tanner, as Rashi explains, was built differently than a kira. A kira is this wide appliance with walls going straight up. On top we have room for two pots. So with regard to a kira, the Mishnah tells us that if it's fueled with these types of fuels of kash and gvava, there's no concern. If it's fueled with gefes ve'etzim, this pulp and the wood which generate coals, then there's a concern. There's a concern of shama yechata, that he might go ahead and get involved in stirring those coals, as we learned up until now. So that's regarding kira. The Mishnah here is discussing a tanner, which was built differently than a kira. It's wide on bottom, now we're on top, the walls are inverted, and as Rashi says, they maintain a high level of heat in there. It is a more powerful type of appliance. Therefore, there's a greater concern of Shamei Chata. And as the Mishnah teaches us, with regard to a tanner, even if he uses kash and gvava, we're concerned that perhaps on account of the high degree of heat that's found in this tanner, perhaps some embers endured and there's some sparks remaining, and indeed he may come to ignite them and stir them and do the malacha of Bishul on Shabbos. So once again, says the Mishnah, tanner sheisiku b'kasha gvava, a tanner which was fueled using kasha gvava, lo yitain, he may not place food, bei mitoichay, whether inside the tanner, bei mal gabav, even on top of it. Even if you went ahead and shovel those coals or cover them, there's no allowance by a tanner. Continues the Mishnah, what about a kupach? Kupach was an appliance which was somewhere in between the tanner and the kira. So the walls of the kupach are going straight up. They're not inverted like the tanner, but it's a narrow appliance. It only has room for one kedera on top. So the level of heat in the kupach is somewhere in between the kira. It's more significant than the kira, but less significant than the tanner. If so, we give it a middle category, a middle halacha. It is somewhat related to the halacha of kira and somewhat to tanner. It depends on what type of fuel is being used. Kupach shisiku b'kashmir gvava. It was fueled with straw with the kashmir gvava. Harei zeh kikirayim, that has the halacha of a kirayim, because the fuel is a short-lived fuel, and we give it the halacha of a kira. But if this kupach was fueled with gefes of eitzim, then we're more stringent. Harei ketaner has the halacha of a tanner, on account of the fact that we have a kupach which is hotter than a kira, and we have those significant types of fuels. So in this case, it has a din of a tanner. It says the Gemara, tanner sheisiku. So we discussed a tanner which was fueled. And the Mishnah tells us he may not place food, bei mitoichay, bei mal gabav. So what about placing food next to the tanner, outside the tanner? We learned earlier in Daf Yomi that by a kira that's allowed. Even a kira which has exposed coals, smicha is allowed. You can take food and place it next to the kira. The fire that's coming from the heat that's coming is indirect, and therefore there's no concern of Shamei Chata. What about a tanner? So Rav Yosef suggests as follows: Toichay mamish. When the Mishnah tells us food may not be placed b'toichay, it's literally inside. Al gabav, on top. Al gabav mamish. So only there, in those locations, is there an issur. Aval lismech shaper dami, but merely to place food next to the tanner, it's mutter. Eis ve'abaye, you can't say that. Let's take a close look at the Mishnah. Kupach shisiku b'kasha v'gvava, a kupach which was fueled using kasha gvava. Harei kikirayim, so it has a din. It is equated with kirayim, begefes of eitzim. But if it was used, fuel of gefes v'eitzim were used, harei ketana has the halacha of a tanner. Va'asur, and the kupach is asur like the tanner. Now, the Mishnah implies that it's only because it's a kupach that it's asur, because we equate it to a tanner. But if we go ahead and equate the kupach to a kira, this case would be mutter. Hakikira shari. But if the kupach would have the same din of a kira, then it would be mutter. And apparently, this Mishnah is discussing the coals which were exposed. Because if these coals were covered or shoveled, it's very difficult to fathom that the Mishnah would say that a kupach would be asur. Because once he covers and shovels those coals, even if he's using gefes ve'etzim for the kupach, it would be mutter. That's Abaye's approach. Abaye is making that assumption here. So if we're speaking about coals that are exposed, and the Mishnah is telling us that the kupach, which was fueled using the gefes ve'etzim, is asur, because we equate it, in this case we give it a din of a tanner. We infer from here that we're not for that fact that we equate it to a tanner. If it would be a kira, it would be mutter, even if those coals are exposed. Is that so? It says the Gemara, Harei ketana ba'asur, hake kira shari. But if it would have a din of a kira, it would be mutter, meaning that a kira in this case is mutter. But my askina, what are we speaking about? Ileim al gabav. If we're speaking about placing the food on top of this kupach, what are we speaking about? Ileim ksheinu gar v'katam. We're speaking about that the coals were exposed. How can you suggest that if the kupach would have a din of a kira, you may place food on top of the kupach with exposed coals? Ela kira ki ein grufa ktuma al gaba mishari? Is that so, that a kira in this case is mutter? Certainly not so. We learned in the first Mishnah that if one fuels a kira using gefes ve'itzim and those coals remain exposed, he may not place food there. Apparently the Mishnah here is discussing smicha. Not placing food inside or on top of the kupach, but rather placing food on the outside next to the kupach. And indeed, the Mishnah tells us, Uktani, hareu ketana ba'asr. It's only because, in this case, where the kupach was fueled using the gefes ve'itzim, the kupach is equated with a taner. Therefore, smicha is asr. But otherwise, if the kupach would have had a din of a kira, smicha would be mutter like a kira. But it's only because we're equating like a taner to its asr. Says Abaye, I have a clear raya that smicha by a taner is asr. Says the Gemara, Omar Rad Barava, not necessarily so. Perhaps the Mishnah is speaking about that the coals were indeed shoveled or covered. Hacha bekupach garaf v'katum. We're speaking about the kupach where the coals were shoveled v'katum or covered. V'taner grufak tumaskinan, and the taner discussed in our Mishnah also had its coals covered or shoveled. And therefore, in this case, the Mishnah is telling us that the kupach, which was fueled with these gefes ve'itzim, harika taner, has the same din of a taner, since a kupach is more hot than a kira. He used those significant fuels of gefes ve'itzim which generate coals, and therefore it has a din of a taner. And even after shoveling or covering those coals, the afagav degar for kotum al gabavasa, you may not place food on top of this kupach, just like a taner, because a taner is so hot inside. We're so concerned about the heat in the taner that even if he goes and shovels or covers the coals within the taner, it's still aser. The Mishnah tells us, what about a kupach? Does a kupach has the same din as a taner? Well, it depends. What type of fuel is being used in the kupach? If he's using merely kasha gvava, then it's okay. But if he's using gefes ve'itzim, in that case, even if the coals were shoveled or covered, the kupach is aser just like a taner. But that's only because we equate it to taner. But implied from here is that should we have equated the kupach to a kira, in this case, it certainly would be mutter. Because once he shovels or covers those coals, even if those coals are gefes ve'itzim, it will be mutter like in a kira. As we learned in the first Mishnah of the parak. The kira, if the kupach would have a din merely like a kira, ki grufa k'tum shaber dami, then certainly if he shoveled or covered those coals, it would be mutter. So Rav Abba maintains that the Mishnah is not discussing the halacha of smicha. Rather, the Mishnah is discussing placing food on top of the kupach. And the Mishnah is telling us that even if those coals were covered or shoveled, it's still aser. The kupach that was fueled using gefes ve'itzim is aser just like a taner is aser, even after the coals were shoveled or covered. So in summary, we have a machlekes regarding being soimich, lismich, taking an item and placing it next to a taner. According to Rav Yosef and Rav Ada Bar Ava, that's mutter. According to Abaye, it's aser. Continues the word Tanya. Kavasi Abaye, we have a brisa which supports Abaye's shita. The brisa says, Taner shisiku b'kasher gvava, a taner which was fueled with kasher and gvava. Ein soimchen loy, one may not place an item next to this taner. Vein tzorch loy, and certainly al gabav, on top of it. Certainly one may not place an item inside this taner. And once again, even if he shoveled these coals, even if he covered them with ashes, a taner is more stringent than everything else. It is aser to place food there. And that's even by kasha gvava, which are those flimsy sorts of fuels. And certainly by gefes ve'itzim, which are more significant form of fuels which generate coals, the Isser applies there, certainly. What about a kupach? Sheisiku b'kasha v'gvava, a kupach which was fueled using kasha v'gvava, in this case, has a din like a kira. We're not concerned with those fuels which burn out. One may do smicha, one may place an item next to the kupach, just like a kira. Vein, the Hagoyis Hagra takes out the word vein, And it says v'nois l'gabov, and one may place food on top of this kupach. But that's because he used kasher gvava. However, if you use gefes ve'etzim, ein soimchen loi. In that case, the kupach has a din of a tanner, and one may not place an item next to the kupach. So certainly we see from this brayso very clearly that smicha has the same din as the other things. With regard to a tanner or a kupach, smicha is not allowed, just like placing the item into the tanner or on top of it. So in summary, we have three categories of appliances. We have the kira, we have the kupach, and we have the tanner. The kira is the most lenient type form of appliance, as we learned in our first Mishnah. So if it was fueled using kasher gvava, it's mutter. If the fuel was gefes ve'etzim, then it depends if it is gorer v'katim, if the coals were shoveled or covered, it's mutter. Otherwise, shehiyah is aser. If the food is still partially cooked, we learned the sheet of Chananya that if it's a third cooked, that's okay. Okay, so shehiyah is aser. What about smicha? Placing an item next to the outside of the kira, that's mutter. What about a kupach? A kupach has a level of heat somewhere in between the kira and the tanner, so it's more stringent than a kira. If it was fueled with kasher gvava, it's mutter. What about if we use gefes ve'etzim? So here we have an interesting machlokes, because according to Abaye, if those gefes ve'etzim were shoveled or covered, it's mutter. Because once again, Abaye interpreted our Mishnah, the discussion in our Mishnah regarding kupach, to referring to a case where the coals were exposed. Abaye held that it's improbable that the Mishnah would apply an isser to a kupach which was fueled with the gefes ve'etzim if those coals were already shoveled away or covered. So apparently our Mishnah is discussing a case where the coals were actually present, they're exposed, and therefore a kupach is aser. But if you should go ahead and shovel those coals or cover them, certainly a kupach would be mutter even if you use gefes ve'etzim. However, Rav Yosef and Rav Ada Rav Ava apparently hold that no, our Mishnah is discussing a case where the coals were indeed shoveled away, and therefore we see in our Mishnah that there is an isser by a kupach even if the coals were gar fakatim. Shehiyah is aser. However, there is a machlokes between Abaye and Rav Yosef and Rav Ada Rav Ava regarding to smicha. According to Abaye, smicha is always aser. According to Rav Yosef, when we use gefes ve'etzim for a kupach, whether they're here, they're exposed, whether they're not, whether they were shoveled or covered, smicha is always mutter. Finally, we learned about a tanner, which has a high level of heat. We're more concerned about the remnants of the embers or the sparks. We're concerned that he might go ahead and reignite the fire and do shamei to enhance, to hasten the cooking process. Therefore, in that case, it's always aser, whether you use kasher gvava, whether you use gefes ve'etzim, whether they're present and exposed, whether he shoveled them away, it's aser. However, Rav Yosef and Rav Ada Bar Ava maintain that although it's aser, but smicha, merely placing an item next to the tanner, in that case, it's mutter. Continues the Gemara. Amalei Rav Acha b'Rav Rav Ashi. Hai kupach hechi dami. So we have the kira on one side, which is more lenient. We have the tanner on the other side, which is more stringent. What is the understanding? What is the pshat in this kupach? Hechi dami. Iki kira dami. If it is meant to be equated to a kira, I feel b'gefetz ve'etzim nami. So even if he fueled them using he used this gefetz ve'etzim, then a kupach should also have a din of a kira. Why are we more stringent when we fuel the kupach with gefetz ve'etzim? Why don't we give it the same halacha as the kira? If the kupach is equated with the tanner, then let it have the same halacha as the tanner all the way. I feel even if it was fueled with kasher gvava, then it should also be also like the tanner. Amalei told them it's somewhere in the middle. Nafish heavily with the kira, it has more heat than a kira. V'zuter heavily with the tanner, but less heat than a tanner. If so, we give it a status of somewhere in between the kira and the tanner. When it was fueled with kasher gvava, we give it a din of a kira. When it was fueled using the gefes ve'etzim, we give it a din of a tanner. Says the Gemara, what is the dimensions. What is the configuration of the kupach? Hey chidami kupach, hey chidami kira. What is the difference between the configuration of a kupach and the configuration of a kira? Kupach is makam shvisas achas. On the kupach, there's a place to put one pot. Kira is like a double kupach. Has makam shvisas shtei kederis. Has place for two pots on top of it. Amar Abaye, v'iter Rabbi Yirmiyah, afanana v'tanina. We learned the same concept in the Mishnah in Kalim. We see from there that indeed the kira and kupach have these dimensions. The Mishnah says, kira shenechalka lo arka Torah. If a kira was split, was broken alongside its length, it's Torah because it's rendered unfit for use. L'rachba, however, alongside its width, tmeya, it's tamei. Why? Because by splitting the kira alongside its along its width, so now he splits the kira into two. So you can place one pot on one half and one pot on the other. It's still suitable to be used. Kupach, however, kupach bein la'arkam and la'rachba Torah. If it was split in any direction, it's Torah because it initially only had room for one pot. So if it gets split, there's no room for anything, and it is rendered unfit for use, and it's Torah. Continues the Mishnah, a noisnin beitza b'sadamecham, or you not place an egg next to this hot water kettle, which was already taken off the flame. So we will not place a beitza, an egg there, b'shvil shatis galgil, so that it gets slightly roasted, slightly cooked. It's an isser, it's a malacha. Why? Because although it's not really next to the fire, but this kettle still has the heat of the fire. He's heating the beitza with toldas eish, with a derivative of fire, and it's also. So he can't do that b'shvil shatis galgil. So Rashi says, why are we using the word shatis galgil? Because when it's raw, when the egg is raw, it doesn't really roll properly. So it's only once it's cooked or roasted. So he's roasting and cooking it b'shvil shatis galgil. Now, indeed, it rolls. When we not break the egg crack it into a material which was heated by the sun. So this is called toldas hachama, a derivative of the heat of the sun. That also is asur according to Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi Mater, he says toldas hachama, a derivative of the sun heat, is mutter. Everybody agrees to this halacha. You can't cover the egg in the hot sand or dust on the side of the road. It should roast. Continues the mission with one more halacha. Masa story. The people in Tveria who have those hot water springs, which were remnants from the mabel, which was hot water. So they had those chami Tveria. So they did something as follows. They wanted hot water on Shabbos. So what did they do? They brought along silan shotzanin. They routed a pipe containing cold water, through the stream of hot water. And they had cold water running through that stream on Shabbos, and it warmed it up. So they have hot water on Shabbos. No, you must be careful. In Shabbos, with regards to the water that came through on Shabbos, you can't even use it. Shabbos has the halacha, the status of hot water which was cooked on Shabbos. You can't use it for washing or drinking. In B'yamtiv, if this water came through on Yamtiv, then it has the halacha kechamen shuchim b'yamtiv, and indeed you can't use it for washing. You can use it for drinking because on Yamtiv, the malacha of cooking is allowed for ichal nefesh, for human consumption. Therefore, you can use this water for drinking, although you can't use it for washing, because one may not wash water, one may not cook up water on Yom Tov for bathing, washing purposes. Okay, let's take a quick hazara of today's daf. We began with the halacha of a person left his pot on a stove which had those exposed coals. So he did a shehiyah be'issa. What is the halacha of the food in that pot? The Gemara told us, it depends. Koydem gzera, la'achar gzera. There was a gzera decree enacted that everything is asur, whether he did it b'shoigeg or b'mezid. Even b'shoigeg, the Chacham was concerned that he's deceiving us. He really did it b'mezid, and he's pretending that it was inadvertent. Therefore, all across the board, they applied an issa. What happened koydem gzera, before this gzera? According to Rabbi Rav Yosef, shoigeg and mezid are both mutter. The Gemara said it's different than mevashel, when a person actually cooks, because here he didn't do a ma'isa, it was merely passive. According to Rav Nachman Yitzchak, shoigeg and mezid are both asur. And the Brisa presented a machlokes between Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda with regards to food which was fully cooked. and a shehiyah took place by Isser, according to Rameya, since it's fully cooked, it's mutter. According to Rav Yehuda, we're concerned about the additional cooking, if it's in stomach v'yafale, if the additional cooking, the overcooking actually benefits, it proves the value of the food, that too is considered part of the cooking process. And since he did shehiyah b'isser, it's asr. The Gemara proceeded with the halach of chazara, that even by day it's mutter. That according to the shita, that chazara is mutter, it's irrelevant whether it took place at night or by day. The Gemara told us if he's holding onto the pot in his hand, certainly chazara is mutter, because the chazara is merely a continuation of the initial process. It's a continuous process. It doesn't look like it's a new introduction of food to the stove. If the food was placed on the karka, we have a machlokes. The Gemara told us the concept of intention. He needs to have das. Initially, he has to have the das to go return the item onto the stove. The Gemara said there are two versions of this halacha. Some say this condition applies even when he's holding the food in his hand. Some say this only applies once he placed the food on the ground. Where it was placed, since it was placed on the ground, it appears like the shehiyah, the cooking process, was interrupted. In that case, the das is pertinent, it's required. Since the location is not favorable, at least let him have the proper intention. The fact that he had intended on returning the item back to the stove, we consider it to be a continuous bishul, a continuous shehiyah. The Gemara concluded regarding some cases that are neither his hand, neither karka. What about on the makil? What about placing it on the bed? What about pouring the contents from one pot to the other? So it's the same content but a different pot. And the Gemara concluded with a teku. The Gemara continued with the halach of tanar and kupach. And in conclusion, we had a machlokes between Abaye and Rav Yosef and Rav Ada bar Ava regarding smicha. What about placing a food item next to a tanar? According to Abaye, it's asr. According to Rav Yosef and Rav Ada bar Ava, it's mutter. And we have three categories of kira, kupach, and tanar, and various halachos regarding each one. Regarding a kira, which is the most lenient of all, since the heat inside is not so intense, the concern of reigniting those flames are not so prevalent, and therefore it depends what he used as fuel. If he used kasha gvava, it's mutter. If he used gefes ve'etzim, and he was goyer v'kaitim, he shoveled or covered those coals, it's mutter. Otherwise, it's asr. But smicha by a kira, placing an item next to the kira, all agree is mutter. What about a kupach, which is a narrow kira? So there, we have a machlokes. According to Abaye, if he used gash gvava, all agree it's mutter. If he used gefes ve'etzim, and he actually shoveled them away, according to Abaye, it's mutter. According to Rav Yosef, it's asr. What about he didn't shovel them away? All agree it's asr. What about smicha? According to Rav Yosef, it's mutter regardless. What about a tanar? So here, there's no difference of what types of fuel they're using, whether it's kasha gvava, whether it's gefes ve'etzim, it's always asr. What about smicha? According to Rav Yosef, even a tanar, smicha is allowed because the heat is coming indirectly. There's no concern in the case of smicha, and it is mutter even by a tanar. The Gemara concluded by giving us a Mishnah, which told us that one may not place an egg next to the hot water kettle, and the Mishnah proceeded with regards to Toldois Hachama, something which was heated by the sun. Is that also considered to be a bishul? According to the Tanakama, yes. According to Rav Yossi, no. And the Mishnah concluded with the halacha of choil and avak drachim. According to everybody, it's asur. And then with the story of Anshe Tveria, who routed the water through the Chamet Tveria, and the Rabbanah told them it's not allowed. It's considered as though it was cooked on Shabbos, and you can't even use it. If it happened on Yontif, you can't use it for bathing, but you can use it for shtiyah.